Hey, welcome back. You are listening to or watching the Work Cultured podcast, where good companies keep good company, including David Ewing, David G. Ewing, and all of his companies. David G. Ewing is the CEO of Motive for almost 24 years and CEO of a new software startup called Content Lion, which we'll hear more about. Dude's a Harvard grad, and he just rolled off as the president of the Austin chapter of EO, which if you don't know what that is, we'll dive into that as well because you need to know. But David, hey, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Jason, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So let's just give me a high level snapshot. You know we'll dig into the meat and potatoes in a bit, but give us a high level of who you are, how you got here, and then we'll dig in a little more after that.
Sure. So Jason, I'm an entrepreneur who is the son of entrepreneurs. My mom was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. And so I don't know if it was preordained, but the idea that maybe I want to do something else was never really kind of in the DNA, so to speak.
Yeah, not an option.
So, since I think I did get a job right out of college, and I did that to learn for a bit. But then when I was 24, I started the companies that's now Motive. And and it's been a fantastic ride ever since. It is filled with plenty of exciting moments, complete stressful situations, but it's been great. And I've had a chance to also start some other companies along the way, most notably Content Lion, which is now in its third month, and we are aggressively working on that business as well. So I'm now co-CEO of two businesses, and it is a lot of fun and busy.
Yeah. Elevator pitch for Motive, elevator pitch for Content Lion.
Yeah, the elevator pitch for Motive is that we believe the best customer experience wins. And you can't get the best customer experience by just smiling brighter and jumping higher and running faster. You have to have organized and disciplined systems in place that involve people, process, and technology to make sure that from the moment someone's heard about your company to the very last time they bought the final thing from you, they have a magnificent experience and find reasons to do business with your company and not others. So that's Motive.
Excellent.
Content Lion is about sharing your material with the world. So being able to take every video, every asset, every digital image, translate it into all of the different languages that it needs to be translated into, and then publish it to your website, to your mobile device, to your portals, to your customers and trading partners, and making sure that you store it and publish it and share it. Content Lion is the number one place to do that.
Okay, so content concierge, so to speak. What's the competition there, or is there? Are you trying to do something more pioneering?
Oh, there's dozens of competitors in this space. The space is called the digital experience platform space. But what's really interesting is we are covering a particular niche of it. And that is that Oracle had a product called Oracle Content Management that has a very strong following and lots of customers. But Oracle is going to be exiting the business in 2 years. And there's really not a good home for those customers because when you look at the other things out there in the digital experience workplace, they don't have the same combination of features in the same kind of organizational structure that those companies need. So companies like Red Bull Racing and Aon and others who are like very notable Oracle content customers need a home that is as complete as what they had in Oracle Content Management, and Content Lion is what we're building for them.
Very cool. Okay. And last kind of elevator pitch before we get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak. EO. For those who don't know what EO is, tell us. I do because I'm there, but
yes.
What is it?
If you're an entrepreneur, this is your home, your friends, your network, your education, your university. It is everything all in one. It is a cult to help you become a better entrepreneur, a better person, a better spouse, and do all the crazy things that you need to do as an entrepreneur. Because if you're not careful, you can step out of balance so easily as an entrepreneur, right? You can wreck your home life. You can, or you can prioritize everything in your home life and wreck your business, and now you have no income, right? So how do you do all of that while keeping your head screwed on straight? That's what Entrepreneurs Organization is all about. Its official mission statement is to unlock the potential of every entrepreneur. But really what it is the support network that helps everyone feel like they're not alone and gives them a chance to take and add an extra zero to their top line by building better, smarter, faster companies.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I love that you mentioned not feeling alone, right? And that's one of the reasons a lot of our listeners are here, is we're CEOs, we're running these businesses, we're focused heavily on culture, and we realize that if it weren't for people, we'd have almost no issues in our organizations. And yet there are people, including us, and a lot of times we're the issue. And so we like to really talk about that and really dive into the nuances of people struggles, workforce struggles. And so, yeah, the first question out of the gate, and I ask this to everyone, and I'm going to ask you kind of to prime the vulnerability, is what is a mistake that you've made in leadership that you'll never forget?
That's easy. Because I made dozens of them, so if not hundreds.
Yeah, same.
But the most salient, most painful one I can think of is has a story to it. So I mentioned my parents were entrepreneurs, and so my dad had a manufacturing business for years. It was a big Detroit manufacturing company making bolts and all these different automotive parts. And I used to work there when I was a kid. And one of the things that a lot of the old timers would tell me is they'd tell me about when my dad used to run the place, how much fun it was, how great it was. And I was like, why? And it was because my dad decided to pay all of the workers in the plant based on an incentive scheme where it was like, the more you produced, the more money you made. So and he put up a big scoreboard, and I don't know how he did it in the 70s, but it must've been with like really cheesy stuff. But he had this big scoreboard and people were like making parts. And he said, the productivity shot through the roof because if somebody just, normally would have an excuse not to make parts, like, oh, there's not a place to put them, they would just make the parts and put them on the floor. And then when the high-low came by, they'd stack them in there and do it. So they were talking about what a Vegas like atmosphere it was like, as everyone was just jamming. In fact, it got so bad, some of the operators would bribe the high-low driver to bring the steel over to their machine first. They'd be like, hey, here's $20, kid, keep it fair,
oh my God.
It was just really funny, right? And I had this vision in my mind of this great thing, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I always remembered as a kid, I would like to take some kind of innovative, incentive scheme like that into, my businesses, because wouldn't that change everything, right? So Motive is a professional services company, right? We systematically implement the systems that make customer experience go. And I thought about that story and thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build an incentive program for my team so that the better the product is, the faster they can get it to the customer and the more profitable it is, everybody that was on that consulting team will benefit. And so I put this whole incentive scheme in place, and I thought I was a really good Excel modeler, right? Like I thought I knew all the different things, but I will tell you that when you put incentive schemes in place, wow, do you bring out a different side of everybody that's involved, right? And so it was, I'd say 70% of the people were they did their job before, they did their job afterwards. The incentives were kind of nice, but they just did their job with no effect based on the incentive scheme. But 30% of my team went nuts. And when I say they went nuts, I mean that they started scheming to be like, all right, how do we game the system to make this happen? And then they would start doing these unusual behaviors where they wouldn't help somebody because it wasn't part of their incentive program. And they would, get involved in things that weren't their business and it was just like, it got very, very strange. And then as I tried to adjust the program and keep it fair, everyone assumed I was out to just trick them and I was there to just fool them. And it was a whole, I just had brought the carrot out and now I was pulling it away and like bait and switching. And I mean, the culture turned so toxic so fast because just a couple of people started assuming the very worst about me because money was on the line. And I can't tell you what an absolute unmitigated, total knockdown disaster, dumpster fire it was to do that. So I went back to my dad afterwards and I was like, hey man, I tried to do what you did. And he's like, we got rid of that program, right? And I said, well, I suppose you did because it wasn't there when I worked there. And he said, yeah. He said, the quality was just terrible when we did that. we had to get rid of it. I was like, oh, I never heard the end of the story. I never asked when I was a kid, why don't you still do that program? It was so great.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, it didn't work. And I was, oh man. So yeah, incentives are awesome. I love incentives. I think they're great, but boy, are they hard to control once people are coin operated. And boy, that was a dumpster fire. So
they're hard to get right. And it's so funny because you're a kid and like you're watching it from the outside thinking like, oh, you all you saw as a kid was a camaraderie and like the fun, high energy that came from it. You didn't have a peek behind the curtain. Turns out even your dad wasn't doing it anymore. And that's hilarious.
Yeah. So the old timers, I think, had selective memory and they told me about the good old days, but apparently them good old days weren't so good,
Yeah. Goodness gracious. How long ago was that with your 23, 24-year-old company?
Oh yeah. So I implemented that disastrous incentive scheme about 7 years ago and had it in place for about a year and a half or 2 years. And then, but it's still so painful that I just remember the pain of it. And it's a shining example of what happens. There's another side to that story too, which is I think that assumptions are at the basis of every culture. And there's so many assumptions that people have. And those assumptions can be everything from this company is here to trick me and, and to get the most out of me without giving me anything in return. Like that's an assumption some people either have that they bring to the workplace and they can poison your culture, or they get because of the signals that I have inadvertently sent, or something I've done. But, that's one set of assumptions, but there's many others like, hey, benefit of the doubt. This is a good person. He believes in the right things. And if you can help people understand and identify their assumptions, I found that was how I got. And if you can't, get the assumptions to change, unfortunately, that is a great reason to part ways. And I think there have been people that I've had in the past where they're just so convinced that anybody they work for is there to get them. They just can't be a motive, So that's been tough to handle as well. But yeah, I think that understanding that nobody had really quite explained it to me like that until after the incentive program debacle happened. That just you have to look at that. And when I play back the people who the incentive program warped, I can see that they had assumptions about me or about the program or about how it should just work in general that they just weren't there. And but perception is reality. So
it is. And man, giving the generous assumption does not come naturally for me. It is a learned skill that I have to continually hone. It's what I want to do. I mean, life is just easier if I assume generously of the people around me, but sometimes it is very, very difficult to do.
I find myself a lot of times creating a narrative in my head about what's going on and why something happened. And I'm sad to say that I'm very skeptical. And so it takes a while for me to build trust with a company or a person. And I just am mindful of that. Why should I feel that the people that work with me are any different? They are going to come in and they've probably been burned before. And so they're skeptical. And so, unlike our justice system, you are guilty until proven innocent. And I think that, just through conduct and through all those small interactions I have with people, I realize every single one of those is really a trial for me. And it's a chance to reshape the assumptions that people have about me and about the company and about what we stand for.
Yeah. And I think all of us leaders have to struggle through that, right? Because everybody that comes into our fold has their own baggage, and they're also going to get some of mine. And I'm not a perfect leader, never will be. And then, I love Dr. Brene Brown, and she talks a lot about how we always have to complete the circuit. Like our brains are not okay with an incomplete story. And so when we get information, we complete the story with whatever data our brain comes up with, even if it's completely insane, just because we don't want the incompleteness. Like we can't handle it. And so given that, if I have done even a couple of unintentional things to erode trust and they're coming in with their baggage, then it's just a recipe. It's just so easy then to fall into that negative assumptions category and telling yourself, completing those stories with not helpful information.
Jason, I think you just came up with the explanation for why conspiracy theories are so prevalent.
Oh, yeah.
The brain's got to complete that circuit, man. So yeah, there you go. Thanks, man. I always wondered how those things get started. Now I know.
Because they're all true, David. What are you talking about?
Birds aren't real. Didn't you know?
Birds? Wow. No, man. They're just robots that have been invented since before. Yeah. Anyway, we digress. Tell me about, okay, so you're obviously, by stepping into a new co-CEO role, you wouldn't be doing that had Motive not been in a really good place. At least I assume, right? Like if things were in crisis mode, you're not going to go do another project. So obviously 7 years ago, this incentive thing kind of threw a wrench, at least in some of the people that were involved. Lasted 2, maybe 3 years. So really you're only talking like a little bit pre-COVID to now to kind of like recoup and build in a new, probably comp plan, to, rebuild trust where it might've been eroded. Tell me about that journey, or am I totally incorrect in my assumption there?
Well, your first assumption is Motive doing well so that I could step out and do content line, and the answer is yes.
Good.
Yes. And then the second thing is, recovering from that disaster. It actually wasn't that bad of a recovery because, we had put this incentive program in place, and the way we brought it to the team, it was the way that we were handling bonuses. And so what we did to get out of it was, unfortunately, we did have a couple people, they just had to go. They were lost and they were so furious and so angry that, they went out the door screaming and yelling. It was rough, but there was like 2 of those, so it wasn't the end of the world. What we did with the rest of the crew, though, was we held a series of town hall meetings where we just said, hey, we want to compensate all of you. We want to compensate you in a great way. We want you to feel like it's an exciting place to work, and we want to recognize talent. So how do we do that? And what's funny is, as we talked to the team and came up with it, we joked around. It was like, basically we had 3 philosophies that parallel governments, right? So a little bit of this was communism, right? Where they were like, we would all like to have a little bit of something. Like, so if the company makes profit, like, can we all have some? But that's not all of it, right? It's not just 100% that. So like a small slice of our profit sharing plan became communist. It's like, if you're here, you get some. Like, doesn't matter what you did. Then we did a little bit more that was capitalist, right? So it was like, hey, if you build more time, if you did certain outstanding things, then on a formula basis, you got like a pro rata share that was really wonderful for what you did there. So that was like the capitalist part. And then what's really funny is the part that everybody wanted to be the biggest was the benevolent dictator part. And this is what really blew me away, is that ultimately somebody who really was kind of like a good leader on our team was like, look, we all trust you, and we think that there's so many exceptions in this business, so many things where people take initiative and do something, and you guys see that and recognize it. Why don't you take half the pool and just give it away at your own discretion to whomever you feel, deserves it? And so we called that benevolent dictator. So yes, a little bit of communism, a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of benevolent dictator. That became the new plan. That's what, and I looked around, I'm like, really? That's what you guys want? And everybody shook their heads and we're like, it's what we want. And I said, okay, wow. That's what we got. So we put the issue to bed in about 6 months after the debacle. And but that's what it took. Bad. Is it took a lot of those discussions to do that. So, by the end of 2016 or so, 2017, I'm getting my dates a little fuzzy, but it was just kind of in the rearview mirror, and it was old news. It's just another funny story on the road to success. So.
Well, so I love Adam Grant amongst many other authors and leaders. I don't know if you've read him before, but his newest book is called Hidden Potential. And in it, one of the big attributes of leadership he talks about is being pro-social. And it's the type of leader who collects other people's ideas and data. They raise the collective intelligence of their teams versus being the smartest person in the room, right? Like, most teams actually are less productive brainstorming than an individual would be brainstorming. The only way you can get around that is with this pro-social attribute, where you're just collecting data from everyone's opinion, valuing it. Nobody feels like there's a psychological safety, right? So that they can like express what their ideas are. And, to come up with something like what you're talking about, these 3 different slices of bonus incentive plan as the collective intelligence rose with your people after a debacle. I mean, man, that's incredible. That's a great success story from a great disaster story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting way of spinning it, because I do feel, to your point about sometimes when you brainstorm, you can go so much faster, so much further on your own. One thing that I have not implemented in my company that I really like is I've heard from people who used to work at Amazon that when you go to a meeting at Amazon, it sounds like a meeting that nowhere else in the world, because everyone's prepared, everyone has had written material, and you come to the meeting and you either are expected to have read the material ahead of time, or you just spend the first 15 or 20 minutes of the meeting reading the material before you then have your discussion and go forward. I do not do that in my business. I wish I was that organized, but I love that idea and was wondering like, how do I implement that? So yeah, I think that brings out the both the individuality as well as like the social group together. And I think that would be pretty cool. So
it does. And one of the reasons is just because of how differently everybody's hardwired. People that typically an entrepreneur is going to have that more foot on the gas, assertive kind of air about them. And if they're also in charge, I mean, I'm speaking from experience, I tend to steamroll in meetings. And so the brainstorming is really a couple ideas end up out there, and then I start riffing on them and run with it. And all of a sudden I've whiteboarded the entire thing. Well, I mean, I did not allow people to have a voice, truly. They didn't have space to think about it, to contemplate. They weren't prepared ahead of time. And some of us are really quick on our feet. Other people, again, they had a process, right? And so I think that's why that Amazon strategy is so effective.
Yeah, I agree. And I am guilty of the exact same behavior. And it has been something I've been working on a lot, to hang back and to just make sure that, instead of speaking first or speaking the loudest or speaking the most often, I try to do none of those 3 things. And sometimes the patience required is beyond my abilities.
Yeah. What's that word you just said? Patience?
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever.
I can't spell it. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, obviously one of the things we talk about is culture. We've been talking about culture, and that's kind of why I'm throwing these little tidbits into what I'm hearing from your story and ways that you've been successful. What else would you say? What are some of the secret sauces to the way you've built a strong culture that's allowed you to keep growing and thriving?
The number one thing is it's a little bit trite, but I think it's important. And that is to really sincerely find core values. And I don't mean the core values where you go down to the Franklin Covey store, buy a poster that says excellence with somebody rowing, and it's like like that is so cliche and so difficult and doesn't speak to anybody, right? Yeah. What we've done at Motive is we've tried to make core values that are almost stories out of our history. And we've got, we're an older company, so we can do that. But, for a long time, and it's not a core value at Motive anymore, but for a long time, we used to call it Harry Potter Brave. And the idea was, it was a story about how we'd all gone and we'd seen some Harry Potter movies. We had like a company event, and we were all joking after we came back to work that like, Harry Potter is completely untrained, doesn't know what he's doing, and yet he has to fight like an ogre with like just a couple of crappy spells. And we're like, hey, sometimes we feel like that. We feel like we have to do something very, very difficult. It's new, it's cutting edge. There's no training materials for this stuff yet. We are making the training materials as we go along. And so we had to talk about being Harry Potter brave. And so that was a cool value, and we would give out awards based on that. Yeah. And it's not something, you can't go buy a poster. You can't even make one because Kinko's will tell you that you're violating someone's copyright. So
right.
You have to do it all in house. But yeah, but that was the kind of value that we created. And so, we've gone on and we've created other core values like that, but they're based out of our stories. They're truly part of our culture. It's like, oh yeah, we were all here when that happened. We remember that, and now we're all joking about it. And new people kind of hear the story of what happened and how it went on, and that's where the core values emerge from. But then it's the constant recognition of them. So every Friday we get together, and every Friday we're celebrating and enjoying and like joking around, and when we're calling people out for how they modeled and exhibited those core values. And I think that more than anything else leads to the ability to support decisions in there. Because I think the hardest thing for me as a business owner is, and I've heard this from so many other people in EO and outside, is I just want my team to take initiative and make decisions, right? Why do I have to do everything myself? And the answer is, the reason you have to do it is because unless they feel like you are going to back them up and they have a good rubric for how to make decisions, they're not going to make decisions. Like they're just not going to take that chance. There's no incentive for them to do that, going back to incentives. But there's really no, you haven't given any mechanism for how people can do that. But if there's good core values and a good program in place, then someone can say, well, one of our core values here is standing ovation. We need to stick the landing with this customer. So I made the decision and we spent the extra money or time or whatever, and we stuck the landing, we got the standing ovation. And then as the CEO, whether you agree with that decision or not, you got to back them up because they followed the core values. They did the thing that you set forth. And so
right,
that's it, and when people can build that trust and they have that trust in it, now the core values mean something because people will act and behave according to them. And that's, I've seen that happen in our company. And that was a huge sigh of relief for me when I saw people just taking decisions because they knew what the core values are and they trusted that I would back them up.
Yeah. So you're saying, like, for you, core values is that rubric.
Yeah. I mean, a core value has to take a stand, a core value can't just be like, hey, we all like petting dogs, right? Like, that's not a core value. Like, yeah, we all agree that we do that. We all like to pet dogs, but like, that doesn't help you make a decision in this business, right? So like in this business, what are the things that matter? I think the lights came on for me because my sister started a company, and one of her core values was all about authors. It was a publishing company. She was like, authors deserve a bigger cut. And that was her core value. And that's kind of a nice, edgy core value, right? Like, not everybody thinks authors should deserve a bigger cut of what they do. But she did. And so she built her company that way. And that for me was like, that's a good core value for this business. Now it means something.
That's a core value that it means something for everybody who's there, but it also means something as you're attracting talent, right? Putting the right people in the right seats is so paramount for us, and having core values that, as you say, aren't just, poster from Kinko's. It's that Kinko's doesn't even exist anymore, but you get what I'm saying. It's real. There are behaviors to back it up, and they're based on stories, or they're based on what you're wanting to see from your industry, from your company. And like, I bet she only attracted people that were probably authors themselves,
frustrated. Yeah. It was a call to arms, and it was kind of like, for people, it was a movement, and it takes a stand, and it's polarizing, and it's edgy. And I think that, when you can do those kinds of things, that's really where you, I think, have core values that mean something, instead of just, something watered down that is something we all just generally agree. We all like courage. That's not a core value because we all believe in courage.
Yeah. It's a great personal core value, right? Yeah. But as a company,
but what does that tell us about a company? Yeah, nothing. So can't be a core value.
Yep. I love that. So I love you've just shared a lot of like golden nuggets through story. Obviously everything's not always great. What's keeping you up at night right now? Again, we're not alone, right? So how can you relate to all the other struggling CEOs listening to the podcast?
So the great equalizer in this world, because no matter how old or young you are, how much money you have, is there's 24 hours in a day, right? I get 24 hours, you get 24 hours, Elon Musk gets 24 hours. That's it. And so to me, everything comes down to how can I get more out of the time that I have? Because that's really true wealth. And so what keeps me up at night is trying to come up with different ways to make more happen in those 24 hours and still, of course, be sane and healthy and balanced and, do all those other things. So for example, I'll share my schedule with you right now. So my new routine is I get up at 5:30 every morning and I give myself a half an hour just to peace out, right? Just to like do whatever I want, grab a cup of coffee, pet the dog. Well, yeah, if I want to throw it away with something stupid, right? Like just scrolling, like I could do it if I wanted, like guilt-free 30 minutes. That's what I have. 6 o'clock, it's exercise time, and I just pound it from 6 to 6:45, 6:45, I've got a short window to clean up. By 7:15 or so, I want to be writing, and I'm writing till about 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, I become the CEO of Roar, and I'm the CEO of Roar till noon. You know, I give myself an hour of discretionary time between noon and 1. 1 o'clock, I become the CEO of Motive, and I'm the CEO of Motive till 5. And then after that, I've got 2 hours of discretionary time before dinner, family time. But by 9 o'clock, heads on the pillow again, right? Like that's the overall time. And so I've got 4 hours to be CEO of one company and 4 hours to be CEO of the other. I've got to make sure that everything I'm doing in those 8 hours has a multiplicative effect, right? So that, you know, my time gets a positive return. So to me, the number one thing that I've discovered that I can do that produces, you know, ongoing time valued benefit is recording training materials. I found that in my business, I can record it once. It's now can be used in perpetuity. And so I become a huge proponent of learning management systems, but only if the material doesn't suck, right? So much material that goes into an LMS is so lame that it makes you want to scratch your eyeballs out, right? And usually it's because it's delegated down to somebody who barely knows the material themselves. They're reading off of a cue card, and you're just killing your employees with like the most boring stuff. Is they're scrolling and doing whatever. They're not paying attention to your training material when you make it super lame. So instead, you have to make it hard hitting, impactful. It's got to be the best content they've ever seen, right? They got to be feeling like this material is making me improving my career. And the fact that I have access to this is amazing. So it's got to be unvarnished. It's got to be raw. It's got to be good. And it has to have practical significance. And so that's why I spend actually a fair amount of my time on that, because once that's done, it's got everything that I need to instill the culture and the attitude and the behaviors, as well as the techniques and skills or whatever. And so that at least is one of my keys or insights that I've kind of had in the last 12 months is spend time on that and don't delegate that piece away.
Yeah. That's one hell of a schedule, man. That's so much more structure than I have capacity for, to know that you're CEOing Roar or Content Lion, and then you're shifting gears and CEOing Motive, and man, that's admirable. But I see why, right? You're correct. We only have those 24 hours, and it's not even 24. I mean, it's 24 minus however long we're able to sleep, or you know. So yeah, that's crazy. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure. On the topic of sleep, by the way, that's another just like last culture hack, is that I used to not sleep at all. I used to, you know, like that old cliche, like I'll sleep when I'm dead, you know. I didn't realize just exactly how true that statement is, because I didn't see what it was doing to me. But yeah, I mean, I picked up one of those sleep trackers and a couple of years ago, and it was eye-opening to see just how much my heart changed and how much my heart rate variability changed just based on sleep. Wow. It scared the heck out of me. And so it is a priority. So yeah, head on the pillow at 9 o'clock. It's got to happen so that I can make everything happen.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, man, this has been awesome. We'll shift gears to kind of close things out. Before we kind of jump into the very end, anything big just like on your mind that you're like, I need to say this?
I think the thing that I'm looking at the most is just the impact of AI, like everyone else. And it seems like the more time I'm investing in AI, which at first it was so lightweight what I was doing with it, the more I learned prompts and other capabilities, the more I'm getting an even bigger return. In fact, I wrote the entire business plan for Content Lion with AI. And it was through a series of maybe 5 or 6 hours of like back and forth prompted discussion and things, and you know, to hammer out a real, not just a generic, but like my ideas and thoughts through ChatGPT. It was incredible. And so I think to get the return on time, yeah, I think that it's hard to get started with that. And I think anybody who hasn't yet, it's really worth it seems like a indulgence to just sit down and play with ChatGPT for a couple hours, but it's a must have now. Like you just have to do it until you can learn how to use it. And now it's a godsend.
I agree wholeheartedly. And if you haven't tried Claude AI, CLAUDE, their newest model. I almost never use ChatGPT anymore, even with 4.0
really?
out. Yeah, I've almost exclusively switched. They're both impressive as hell. And yeah, when you learn how to hack them and give the right prompts and have that back and forth conversation to keep refining and improving, you spent what you said, like 5 or 6 hours, probably saved you 20.
Oh, easy.
Or more.
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just your hours, but then sending it off to have somebody review it and revise it and edit and back and forth. So you really saved weeks. It's probably unreal that that's actually true of so many different tasks. Yeah.
Yep.
Man, oh man. All right. Well, before we end with our quick fire, I want to give you a shameless plug opportunity. What do you want to give us, or what do you want us to know about?
I would say that the number one thing everyone needs to know about is Entrepreneurs Organization. Entrepreneurs Organization saves lives. And I don't mean in the literal sense, but I mean in the sense of like everyone who's building a business is building it because they have a dream, right? They have something. Of course, we all want a chunk of change, but what we really want to do is make an impact on the world, right? Change something, whether it's local or it's bigger than local. And Entrepreneurs Organization is the ticket that allows everybody to do that. So it has been great for me. I've been a member now for 11 years in Austin. There is a chapter in just about every city around the world. There's 18,000 members, and you need $1 million business to qualify. But if you don't have a $1 million in revenue business or higher, you can still join as an accelerator and get some of the training and benefit until you get to that new rung. And that is an absolute game changer for anyone running a company.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think it's eonetwork.org is how you plug in to go check your city and see what it's all about. All right, we're going to end with a quick fire. It's a this or that. All right, so I'm just going to say two things, and you give me yours. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Okay. Barbecue or Tex-Mex?
Tex-Mex.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Love petting dogs.
Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee. Energy drinks will kill you.
Yeah, they will. I hit you with one last one. This is more Austin local. Barton Springs or Deep Eddy Pool?
Barton Springs.
Okay.
Like me some Barton Springs. Yeah. A little closer to my house. I love it. So
nice. Hey, David G. Ewing, thank you so much for being on. You just gave us so many great stories, so much gold. It's been entertaining. It's been helpful. And I appreciate your time so much.
Jason P. Carroll, it has been a tremendous honor. Thank you for having me on. Love hanging out with you, man.
Awesome. Well, hey, listeners, viewers, thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Work Cultured Podcast, and we will see you next time.